Hi, my name is Joe Perino. I'm a social studies teacher here at Birchwood School, here on the west side of Cleveland. This is my classroom where I teach 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade social studies. And I'm very eager to tell you about my lesson, George Catlin's Indian Gallery. Let me start out though by just telling you a little bit of background. I'm trained as a historian, and so my interest is always in primary sources, and of course, as a teacher, I want my students to be comfortable looking at the actual documents or at the actual, in this case, maps and images that were a product of the times, and to remove that buffer sometimes that secondary sources put up. I also am very aware of the generational wiring, if you want to call it that, of my students, and so try to put them in touch with multimedia, online sources as much as possible. And then because I've spent most of my teaching career teaching geography, I'm very mindful of the connections between events and place, and how the role of landforms and bodies of water and climate, other aspects of physical geography, have in determining human culture and eventually human events. And that's what I love about the Catlin material. George Catlin's work as a painter of Native Americans at a time when few people were interested in their culture. We're talking about the mid-19th century, 1830s through 1870s, when Catlin did his best work and had it on display. And he is little known, especially considering his achievements. Doesn't get the attention that others from the time period do. And so you have this rich primary source material that you know students are probably not going to be exposed to. Plus, the American Art Museum, Smithsonian American Art Museum, has put much of it online, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. Catlin's work really opens a window into the times and the place, because in his paintings and sketches you see the beauty of the West, and also how it might have influenced the choices that tribes made when they were coming up with their dress, or coming up with their rituals, or coming up with the way to build a home. So it brings all of that together in such a rare way. It's really an opportunity to teach a lot in a short period of time. And so I couldn't resist it, and I'm hoping that you are able to see an opportunity in this also. It's kind of like Lewis and Clark meets Ansel Adams. It's got the qualities of this great expedition together with these visually stunning images, all in one lesson. That's Catlin. He was, just for the sake of, in case you haven't heard of him before, yet he was someone who wanted to use his gifts of painting to capture something important. And so actually he, even though was not a frontiersman by virtue of where he grew up, he left his home in New York and ended up out in St. Louis, and was eventually guided by George Clark, or William Clark rather. And he just painted prolifically. So many things about their way of life interested him. Of course, their appearance. There's a lot of portraits in his work. Their lodging, not only outside but inside, capturing the artwork in it. Their fantastic rituals. Some of the buffalo dances of the Mandan tribes, or the horse captures of the Comanche, or the well, there's just, I could go on. There's so much detail that he captured and was able to carry on this work for decades and amass 500 paintings, okay? Eventually, these works ended up in their rightful place as a national treasure. They're now housed in the Smithsonian American Art Museum, which has a website devoted to Catlin's work, which I really hope you spend some time on. But it didn't happen without obstacles. It took a while for people to appreciate what Catlin had really accomplished, and mostly his attraction when he would put on exhibits was just the visual power of his work. I mean, it really captures untouched Western landscapes and people in the kind of like a freeze frame of Native American life that you could just stare at and study. And I start these lessons by trying to immerse the student in the story of George Catlin, because unless they have a mental map of where this is happening, it's going to be hard to build on and do much else with. So I start out by taking them through just a simple narrative of his travels from his place of birth in the East Coast, up the Missouri River, up some of the other tributaries of the Mississippi River, in the Gulf of Mexico, through the Great Lakes, just so they can get a sense of how far he ranged and how many different Indian tribes he encountered. As students are internalizing the narrative, I want them to be able to match that up with regions and places and get a strong sense of how far west Catlin was. And so they get their own copy of this map of Catlin's travels, which also has the Indians' ancestral locations, and they've just got to be able to trace his travels on the map, and then from narrative to map to website, right? I understand my students just endless hunger for multimedia and for internet, and so the American Art Museum has put a lot of this online, and they call this website Catlin's Classroom, and it's really a neat presentation of the material, because it's got the different voices, scholars who are knowledgeable about Catlin, Native Americans whose ancestors would have encountered Catlin, and then experts or lovers of the West who can kind of place all that happened, all that Catlin encountered in a stunning setting.